One Infernus.
Let me show y'all how it's done. Ops down.
Hi friends, what's up? This is Metro, either your favorite or least favorite content creator in Deadlock. We are going over 7 today. And I cooked up a new build, and as humble as I am, I named it Metro God 7. Today we're gonna go in depth in build crafting, but I want to use this video to go more in depth about my ideas about build crafting, what I value in build crafting, what I think is really important, and what a lot of people crafting builds don't consider. There's this stigma going around right now in Deadlock that my builds are bad. This build currently got me to rank 4, 7 on Europe. I guess with, you know, the build must be good. So yeah, I want to talk about this here for a second. The investment stats. And I know it has been talked about by a lot of content creators for sure, but I just want to go into it again. And I just want to reiterate, in case you don't know, what the investment stats do. They give you bonuses in weapon damage, health percentage-wise, or raw spirit, which got buffed by 25%, so now it gives you a lot of spirit based on your investment. And the way it works is, the more you spend, the less you get in return, so it's diminishing returns. But if you do the math on the distribution, on all 3 of them, but more so orange and spirit in particular, so weapon and spirit in particular, you want to get to 9.6k at least. 9.6k gives you the best bang for the buck. 9.6k in spirit gives you 44 spirit, and 9.6k in weapon gives you 58% weapon damage, which is insane value. Anything over that I would not worry about in any of those categories, right? But I do value these categories very, very highly. And this comes especially into effect if you're playing a character that benefits from all stats, okay? Like some characters are mostly spirit focused, some characters are mostly gun focused, but 7 is actually a character that really benefits from all 3 stats, especially weapon damage too. A lot of people don't realize this, but 7 has one of the best weapon scalings in the game. In fact, after the Wraith nerf, Wraith used to have the highest weapon scaling. Weapon scaling means the weapon damage you get per boon, right? 7 now has some of the highest, if not the highest in the game. Most people don't really know this, or most people don't really care, because 7 obviously works a lot around his abilities, right? Right now his ult is insane. Power Surge is obviously also spirit damage, right? So how does it matter that 7 does a lot of gun damage? Well, there is a little caveat to that. Power Surge procs on every burst you do with the weapon, which means the higher your fire rate, the higher your power surge damage, okay? It scales 1-to-1. So if you do 50% more, if you have 50% more fire rate, you will also deal 50% more power surge damage, roughly, right? Like there's a, yeah, it must be roughly 1-to-1. Which means, right now, if I pop power surge and I shoot, my power surge is gonna proc once every burst. Which means if I add fire rate, my power surge is gonna proc more often. In fact, 45% more often as long as burst fire is active. A power surge build on crack, okay? If you played my old build, the Metro Shock 7, was already like a hybrid build that used a lot of power surge and then had Infuser for the ult. This build is 100% focused around power surge. The ultimate you can still use and you can still stay alive forever and it will still do insane damage, but this is not an ult build, okay? You're not gonna debuff with the ult a lot, and especially early on, the ult is gonna be weaker than in some ult builds. Ult builds historically, right, like they run like early suppressor, they run early heal bane, and then they get unstoppable pretty early, right? And then you just go into the fight, you pop ultimate, you debuff everyone, fire rate slowed, right? Maybe you have Mystic slow, lightning scroll, you stun all of them. And that's how you do the damage, right? And that's a very viable playstyle to play 7. And if your team is good, it's probably the most solid playstyle on ladder. Now, if you want a solo carry, it's not the playstyle. Because if your team does not play around your Stormcloud, or if your Stormcloud is on cooldown, you will lose. Depending on when you're watching this, Stormcloud will eventually get nerfed again. 7 has a really high win rate right now. He's a top 5 character in my opinion. I don't think he's the best character in the game, but he's performing really, really well in all ranks, especially low rank, because people just don't run out of the Stormcloud. So I would expect in the future for them to adjust the Stormcloud damage. Make the Stormcloud have a higher cooldown, or make the Stormcloud just be a bit less powerful, right? But that's not why I'm telling you all of this. I'm telling you all of this because I genuinely believe this build is like the hardest solo carry build of any character in the game right now. And yeah, if you watch the clips at the start, you saw the potential, hopefully. Questions that are gonna come up, I'm sure, in the comments, which is why I'm addressing them now. Why am I running Burst Fire instead of Surge of Power? Why am I investing so much into weapon early on? Why am I running cultist early? And why am I running superior cooldown instead of, superior duration instead of superior cooldown? And I'll answer all of these questions when we're at the part, right, where we buy these items, okay? So do not worry if you have those questions. The start of the build is very, very similar than my Metro Shock 7 and very, very standard, I guess, in terms of like 7 overall in lane, right? Monster rounds helps you clear shaft way faster, and extended magazine, I just like the extra ammo. And obviously, if at any point I need healing, I buy Restorative Shot right now, or Healing Right. Resto Shot is probably more consistent if you have good aim. It got a really good buff. You get 50 health per hero shot every 6 seconds if you proc it. So it's insane healing if you proc it. Sometimes when I'm really low, I still buy Healing right? So let's get this out of the way. If I'm low in the lane, I buy one of these 2 items. But a lot of the time in lane, the regen I get from monster rounds and then later spirit shielding is actually enough to keep me alive, right? So depending on the lane, buy Resto Shot or Healing Right. I am a big fan of spirit shielding now. Every single sort of health gain kind of got nerfed in the last few patches, right? Like we had a lot of nerfs. We had a nerf to Rescue Beam. We had a nerf to Healing Nova, and now we have a nerf to Fortitude, which got hard nerfed, right? It's pretty weak now, I would say. Well, not weak. It's still playable. It's still very good, but it got a lot weaker. So overall, health is very hard to come by, and if you play the meta right now, health is king, right? Like, and especially characters like 7 that are a bit squishier in the early game, but there's not a lot of items that give you a significant amount of health, right? I'm thinking of Fortitude, and then I'm thinking of like Colossus maybe, right? And like later down the line Inhibitor, or you could run an early extra regen. But yeah, anyways, back to Spirit Shielding. It got a buff. It has 2.5 out of combat regen. The move speed is now 1.5 seconds when it procs, and the barrier scales with Spirit, which is really nice because we're gonna have enough Spirit. So this is like the first defensive item that just allows me to stay alive, right? Mostly in lane. If I'm not fighting, I get the out of combat regen, so I can like skip something like extra regen, right? But yeah, the main thing is, this is like the way you should think about this, or the way I like to think about it is, it's like Fortitude for half the price in the sense of like the extra HP, right? Like if I need the HP, I have at least 400 extra HP if I'm in a fight, because this is gonna proc really easily. It's way better than weapon shielding, by the way. Weapon shielding is a bit more inconsistent to proc, like especially in lane. Sometimes the enemy just doesn't do enough gun damage in 3.5 seconds for this to proc. So yeah, in most lanes I just buy Spirit Shielding. You can also skip this or buy it later if you feel like you don't need it, but it's really strong and I end up buying it later after Cultist anyways. And then we go into Cultist. And I guess we're gonna address the first question that a lot of people had in the last few videos on Reddit, people trash talking my builds. Why am I running Cultist on 7? I genuinely believe Cultist by itself is a pretty weak item, because the uptime is 160 seconds, but the downtime is another 90, right? The cooldown is 250 seconds, and the uptime is only 160, which means there's 90 seconds of time in every cycle of Cultist where you just don't have the effects. And the strong part about Cultist is not the money you get from the creeps, that's just a nice small bonus, okay? It's not a farming item, it is really an item that gives you stats that you like on 7, which is health, fire rate, and ability range, okay? We talked about fire rate, and this is gonna come into effect later once we go into the power surge route, right? Fire rate, the longer the game goes, at the end of the game, we have 36% extra fire rate. That's insane stats. 300 plus bonus health, and we get ability range. And ability range works on every single one of our abilities, right? It makes our ball bigger, it makes our AoE of the stun bigger, it makes our power surge radius bigger, so it's easier to proc on multiple enemies, and it makes our Stormcloud bigger, right? So these are all stats that 7 wants, plus we get 30% extra damage against NPCs making it easier to farm creeps, right? Shaft waves, etc., right? So I do like running this early. You can also decide to run it later. And I know I started it off with saying Cultist by itself is bad. If superior cooldown, superior duration didn't exist, I wouldn't even run Cultist. Because superior duration still works on items, okay? Which means we're gonna extend our Cultist sacrifice duration to 205 seconds. Which means now there's only a 45-second downtime. That is an acceptable time for me, to where in the last 45 seconds when I see Cultist go off cooldown, I can start it now. So when I use Cultist, right, I know once this timer hits 45 seconds, I don't have the bonuses anymore, and then I just chill for 45 seconds and try to avoid a fight, right? So it's essential that you have, like, uptime on this, and that you have it active before you start any fight. If I wanted to, use Cultist, I would have to go for Transcendent, which is a really, really big investment in my opinion, right? It's still valuable on some characters, like I see Pockets run this in the later game, but it is a really big investment for me to justify having this, in my opinion. And superior duration really doesn't have many downsides compared to cooldown, in my opinion, right? Once you get later down the line, your power surge is still gonna be up almost 100% of the time. The power surge duration scales with spirit. Once we have enough spirit, once we get to boundless spirit and further, there is gonna be basically no downtime. It's 5 seconds on base once we have boundless, but in-game, when you pick up any gold statues, right, you get spirit passively. So in-game, realistically, in most cases, I have power surge up 100% of the time once I have boundless, okay? Before that, there is some downtime, there's a few more seconds compared to cooldown, but superior duration, again, still works on items, and there's gonna be multiple items in this build that are gonna make use of that as well, okay? And that's the reason I run superior duration instead of superior cooldown. Okay, and if you follow along, right, if we start the build 1-to-1, notice how every item really gives us the next spike in weapon investments at all times. So we have like maximum investments at all times, and we're not at any breaking points, right? Like sometimes we're gonna be, like for example after Cultist, I do want the duration right away, so it is more active, right? So we have a bit of a gap between the next bonus for weapon damage. But as soon as that is up, we're gonna fill up to the next spike in investments, right? And then we go for enchanters, and again, same story. And if you look at the bar real quick, I'll show this off now, and then we'll go more into the next items. Every item here, right? If we go Fleetfoot, Titanic, we're at the next spike. Improved gives us the next spike for Spirit. Spirit Lifesteal gives us the next spike for Vitality. Burstfire gives us the next spike perfectly for weapon investment. Boundless gives us the next spike for Spirit. And then Leech gives us the perfect spike for Vitality. And notice how when the base build is done, we're at exactly 9.6k investment in all three. And this is the first build where this happened, and I didn't do this on purpose, right? I still pick the items based on what I think is good, but I think that's part of the reason this build feels so strong. And this is like, in the clip at the start of the video, I was behind like 20k the enemy team, but I had this exact item layout where I had these exact spikes, and I won against people in 1v3, 1v4 scenarios where they were up in money on me, right? Like, so I do value these spikes really highly, especially the 9.6k spike. After that, I don't really worry about it anymore, right? Once the base build is done, I don't worry. But until then, this is like what makes the build strong, in my opinion. And that's just my entire philosophy about build crafting. But anyways, back to, the items. With going rapid rounds, because we like fire rate, again, because our power surge damage is going to be increased. At this point, we'll be close to maxing power surge to 5, which we do. Usually I only put 1 point, so the skill build is I will put 1 point in static charge to have a lower stun cooldown, then I max power surge, get 1 point in the ball, so I have 2 balls, and then I max ult, then I max 2, and then I max ball. That's the skill build, but again, you can find this in-game. You don't have to worry about the skill build here. But yeah, we're going rapid rounds, and then Enchanter's Emblem. Enchanter's Emblem is still insane value on 7 because it gives us Spirit Resist, and Spirit Resist is good, has always been good. And despite of what the narrative on Reddit was until, a few days ago, or still is, where people act like gun is stronger, there is a reason everyone ends up buying Enchanter's Emblem and not everyone buys Battle Vest. And which, By the way, I just want to bring this up as a little anecdote, okay, about the gun versus spirit debate. There is a reason Enchanter is bought more, right? And Enchanter has already got nerfed like a few patches ago because it was so bought so much, right? Because spirit is actually king, or has always been king, I want to say, in the last few patches in the early and mid game, right? And even in the later game, right? And people also buy more spirit resilience than bullet resilience because spirit is actually, or always was, really strong, right? Redditors, I'm looking at you, little crybabies. Yeah, so Enchanters gives us spirit resist, and but more importantly, gives us more spirit power and cooldown reduction, which is nice. You know, the 7%. It's not really the biggest deal anymore, but yeah. Basically, free HP, free regen, and you know, more spirit power. So we go Enchanters, and then I upgrade to Titanic Mag. I like having Titanic Mag on 7. You can skip this if you want to slide more. I just like this for farming. Clearing crew camps really fast without having to reload. And then I go Fleetfoot. This is just a staple for 7. If you're not running Fleetfoot, you're throwing, in my opinion. This item is insanely good. Fleetfoot is like a top 5 item in the game, right? It lets us slide, gives us bullet resist, and gives us movement speed and slow resist, which is like essential on 7. Because on 7, you want to run around, you want to chase down targets, kill them, and you want to kite back, right? You always want to stay mid-distance where you go power surge, bang, and you shoot, and you run in and out at Mach 5, and you really do not want to slow down, ever, right? If you want to stay out of the melee range of like scary melee characters while still being in range to deal damage. And that's what 7 is really good at. So Fleetfoot is like an essential item for 7. And then we go Improved Spirit. And yeah, I mean, self-explanatory, again, another power spike, gives us more spirit, adds more damage to our power surge. And again, the more spirit we add to power surge, right, the more damage it does, obviously, but again, also affects the fire rate, right? If we have higher fire rate, that's even more damage, right? It works in synergy, okay? And the reason I'm mentioning this is because of Burst Fire, which we'll get into in a second. And then I go Spirit Lifesteal, right? You can get this earlier or later, depending on if you need it. I tend to buy this when I know there's a fight happening, and in early game fights I will have to ult, right? Most of the time. Early mid game, you're not going to do a lot of damage. Like your main first damage power spike with this power surge build is going to be Burst Fire. But before then, you're really not doing a lot of damage with your 3. Or anything but your ult. But if you ult and you don't have lifesteal, the enemy will shoot you out of the sky and you will die, right? And that's why we're going Spirit Lifesteal kind of early, well, early-ish. So if there's a fight happening and I have to ult, this is going to help us stay alive. Okay, and now we're going Burst Fire, right? And this is probably the most controversial item in this build. So I'll just show it off real quick, right? Because most people ask me why not go Surge of Power. And the reason is very simple. Burst Fire does more damage, especially in this build. And why is that? Because if you hit your bullets, right, you get this extra damage spike in weapon investment, right? We're going from 40% extra damage to 58. Burst Fire also is going to be active for 4.5 seconds because you have superior duration, right? So it's going to be active 4.5 seconds every 7 seconds. And the thing with Surge of Power is this will only be active once, which is at the very start of your power surge, right? Because the movement speed and the bonus fire rate that you get, which is 20 and 2 meters, you know, it's gonna stay active for 7.7 seconds with superior duration here, but it's only once. And because your cooldown on power surge is 33 seconds, right? Even if you buy superior cooldown, it's gonna be a 30-second spell. You're not gonna use this more than once in a fight, and if you do, it's gonna be like twice max, right? So my point is, the bonus fire rate that you get and the movement speed only gonna be active at the very start, right? For like 7 seconds, and then it's gonna wear off. And even if that would not be the case, the only other thing Surge of Power gives you is 25 extra spirit in the imbued ability. And we do like spirit, right? We do like spirit in Power Surge. But remember what I talked about in the investment stat? We want to get to 9.6, and Boundless gets us there perfectly, right? Boundless gets us there perfectly. Now, if we were to buy Surge of Power and imbue it on our 3, right? We get to like 32 and a half, right? And then if we were to go boundless, we're still only at 44, right? So the extra Surge of Power investment that I would do here gives us no extra spirit, right? It does give us extra, like the item itself is still active, obviously, but passive investment is not going to give us anything here, right? So notice we're at 44 extra, and now we're still at 44. Whereas if I buy Burst Fire, which is the same price, we go from 40, right? We go from 40 to 58. So we do get another 18% weapon damage just by buying the item. And that's how you want to think about distributions in terms of items, in my opinion, right? And I can show you this in practicality here. We can do a DPS test. So there's a command, which is HUD damage meter, if you want to ever do any testing. And all I'm going to do is, for simplicity, I'm just going to pop Power Surge and shoot the body, okay? So we're starting at like 700 damage, right? And then Burst Fire is going to wear off and we're going down to like around 600 DPS, okay? Now, if I were to sell this, right, and let's assume I bought, for the same price, I bought Surge of Power instead. I'll do the exact same thing again, and we'll just shoot the body. And you will notice the damage starts off lower and goes lower. And now the effect is completely gone, right? And Power Surge is still gonna run for like 15 seconds, right? And now we're doing a lousy 470 DPS, right? Plus, by the way, we have the slide distance, right? And plus we have the movement speed every 7 seconds for 4.5 seconds. So it's just more damage, okay? Is what I want you to understand. It's just more damage. Plus, you know, we can do this where we never have to reload, basically, especially with Fleetfoot, where, you know, we can basically shoot forever. But that's an entirely different story, okay? So that's why we're running Burst Fire instead of Surge of Power, because it does more damage in general, and if the distribution allows it, it's more value. Okay, and then after Burst Fire, we go Boundless Spirit. This is still obviously an insane item. You can also run this before Burst Fire, and it's definitely our main damage spike because you know, like we go from at this point we have improved spirit. We go from 25 extra spirit to 44 plus obviously the Boundless Spirit, and this is really high spirit, by the way. At max level, we're now at 149 spirit power with only 2 purple items, right? So the percentage Boundless Spirit obviously got buffed in the last patch, so this item is crazy. And I'm just gonna reset the hero real quick, because you might say it's not that high when I'm not on max level, right? So I'll show you the actual spirit number once we get to that value. So we're at 24k. I level up my hero to exactly 24k. Baboon, there you go. And you will notice we're still on 136 spirit power, just by having 2 purple items. One is Boundless, which gives us spirit, plus superior duration. And that's really all the spirit we need in this build. That is more than enough, right? We don't need more. We could go for more, right? We could invest more, but the next few items that I'm buying are just to keep me alive, because at this point our damage is high enough usually, right? There will be some items that I buy to increase the damage even more, but spoilers, these orange items are gonna do more damage than if I were to buy like another Surge of Power. It just doesn't add enough damage, right? There is like a few things you could try, like Mercurial Magnum, for example. You could invest. I don't like it personally because you have to kind of imbue it on the ball and then play around the ball, right? This could work if you want to try that instead. In fact, that's actually a kind of cool idea. I'll put that in situational and report back to you. But yeah, at this point, usually, the reason I put it in situational is we have enough damage at this point, usually, right? The only thing at this point I usually need is survivability or armor, right? Like armor's health is what I need, lifesteal, or debuff, right? Where anti-heal the enemy or debuff, reduce their debuff resist. And reducing debuff resist at this point is worth more than just having more raw damage, like Mercurial, right? So this is our core build. And at this point, you do insane damage. And then we buy Leech. Why am I running Leech in this build and not Infuser? Infuser is in situational and you can still run it. but Leech mathematically heals more over time in this build. So if you look at the damage breakdown, you're gonna notice I will still do a lot of gun damage with this build. This is actually a lower value. Usually what ends up happening is I do still like a very decent amount of gun damage. Let me see this game. Yeah, there's still like 23% gun damage in here and 29% power surge damage, right? 30% spirit lifesteal at all times and 30% bullet lifesteal is gonna heal me more than having 6 seconds. Sorry, it's gonna be a bit more, I don't wanna lie. It's gonna be 7.5 seconds. It's gonna be more than 7.5 seconds of 80% spirit lifesteal. And the reason for that is we're gonna shoot our gun the entire time because we're mostly gonna use power surge and not ult, right? Which means the sustained healing is gonna be longer, and a lot of fights will last longer than 7.5 seconds. Infuser is like kind of like a, you know, one and done kind of thing, like me in bed, right? 7.5 seconds and then it's over, okay? Leech is gonna stay active for the entirety of the fight, and it's always gonna give you that 30-30, right? Which means in practice, I'll show you this in comparison, right? If we are low HP, and let me sacrifice with Cultist real quick. If we're low HP and we need healing, right? As long as I shoot them, I will gain a lot of health back still with Leech, right? And that's gonna be active, again, at all times, right? If I'm low, yeah, I will pop in, you know, Infuser and heal a bit more. Not much, by the way, right? Like, it's spirit damage. See, in fact, if my power surge is off cooldown, right, it's fucked. But like, let's assume I'm low and I have everything up, right? I can pop Infuser and gain a lot of health back, but you will notice it's not that much more, right? And it's only gonna last for 8 seconds. Which is like a magazine and a half, and now it's over. And now I have 16% lousy, 16% spirit lifesteal, which is like basically nothing, right? There is one scenario where it's better, where if you have a lot of enemies around you, and you are getting low, right? You can pop Infuser and you can pop ult. And that still works here in this build, and you can still do that, where you get an insane amount of burst healing. And that's why Infuser is still in the situational tab. So if you have fights that are over very fast, like if both teams have a lot of burst, right? Let's say the enemy has like a pocket, a lash, right? If the fights don't last long, I still buy Infuser in this build. But in most games, in practice right now, there's enough characters on the other team. It's really about sustain right now, I feel like. The meta heroes are all really tanky, and they don't usually one-shot you, right? Other than Pocket, by the way, which still exists, but we're getting Spirit Resilience for Pocket later. So Leech just helps you sustain in these fights, and we'll go for even more sustain right after, by the way, in which at what point we can't die at all anymore. And that's the build, right? We're just gonna run around on the 3 and shoot everyone, and never die. And only pop ult if we really need it. And at that point, you know, Leech still usually provides enough, right? So the only time I would ever buy Infuser is if I really need the burst healing, if it's like a one and done, like I'll ult and the fight is going to be over in 5 seconds. But yeah, that's why Leech over Infuser. I hope I explained that properly. 30% is just more than 80%. In most cases, you know, for only 8 seconds or /16%. Right? Because after Infuser is used, there is a 30-second cooldown, and then I only have 16% spirit lifesteal, which is like way lower, obviously, than what this would heal me for. Okay, so we go for Leech, and at that point, our core is done, and at that point, you are actually Jesus. If you have the same net worth as the enemies, or more, right, which you should have on 7, you will win. You will win any 1v1, and you will do massive damage in team fights, right? At that point, you basically all you have to worry about is surviving and sustaining, which is why after I usually buy either Spirit Resilience or Bullet or both, right? So I have a separate category, and usually it ends up being Spirit Resilience, because usually the one thing that can kill me is Burst, right? Which I just explained, because in sustain fights I will heal enough. So usually I buy Spirit Resilience, but if the enemy has like a Viper and has like really nasty gun damage, right? Or if they have a lot of gun heroes, I do buy Bullet Resilience. And in a lot of games I also end up buying both, right? So I buy one or the other or both at this point. Usually I buy one and then I go, you know, for the late game items, and then later down the line I also buy Bullet Resilience if it gets to that point in the game. This build really doesn't require a lot of slots, so you're very free with slots. For whatever reason you have 32k money and you only have one flex slot, you can end up selling Spirit Shielding here, right? And later down the line I marked Titanic and Enchanters, so you can also end up, if you really starve for slots, you can sell Enchanters, right? Because then you have enough Spirit Resilience, Spirit Resist from Spirit Resilience. But yeah, my point is, the build is really not really slot heavy. You don't really need to worry about selling a lot of items in this build. Like, we'll mostly keep everything we have. And then we go for Siphon. Which I guess is another really weird pick. I'm kind of sad that I'm sharing this, but I think this build is gonna get... like 7 is probably gonna get nerfed anyways, but I'm worried that this build is also gonna nerf like 7's gun damage. With this build, because your fire rate is so high, you will have Siphon permanently active. Siphon historically is like an item for auto fire characters like Ivy, Wraith, right? McGinnis, that like perma-shoot. But because your fire rate is so high in this build, you are also perma-shooting, right? So once we buy Siphon here, and the fights are sustained, right, you will permanently drain their life. Because you're shooting so fast, which is like really uncommon for 7s, right? This works beautifully with everything else in the build, by the way. It does work with superior duration, so it increases our duration of the lifesteal to 26 seconds. So a lot of the time I end up having like another 800 extra health just because I have Siphon in the fights. This works really well with the armors, because the armors give you the extra resistance once you're low, right? And 7 doesn't have that much base health, but once you are in a fight in like the later game, right? Or in the late game, and you start stacking up Siphon, right? Like you keep on fighting and you end up getting that extra health, right? Which in this case, I had games where I was like, you know, around this value, where I'm like 4,000, 5,000 HP. Suddenly, being 1/3 HP is not as scary, right? Suddenly being like 1,300, it seems low on the bar, but that's still a big amount of HP, right? I have 70% bullet resist and 66% spirit resist, right? So when someone fights me and they get me low, I can't die, I don't take damage, but I perma heal back, right? And I gain back my health because of leech and siphon bullets, right? So it's like, yeah, they might get me low, but then suddenly I don't take any damage anymore. And I guess I'll show you this clip right now. Play with, they're defending here and it's looking really good for them. And they're getting multiple kills on my teammates, right? And here I am, right? I'm like, at this point I think I ran down the enemy Mooncrow. Right, I'm going low. It looks like I'm about to die, and then suddenly I don't take any damage anymore. But yeah, that's the entire synergy of the build. You build up to insane damage, insane burst damage, and insane sustain with power surge and fire rates, and then you just build for survivability. And at that point, the game is usually over. I'm not gonna lie to you, at 40k. But I know in lower ranks the games last longer, so do not fear. You can keep on going with this. This has infinite scaling potential. You can end up at this point, right? We can end up selling Enchanter's Emblem because we have enough resist, and we can get Unstoppable if they have a lot of stuns, right? I also do like a Counterspell a lot right now. If they have like only Lash ult, right? Like Counterspell is insane. It's like half the price and does what Unstoppable does, where I just parry the Lash ult. But you can buy Unstoppable or Counterspell. But you can also add more damage if you want to, right? You can, Spirit Shielding at this point not needed anymore. You can go for the combo of Spirit Rend Toxic Bullets to get anti-heal on the enemy, more damage, and also reduce their Spirit Resist. Spirit Rend is insane to reduce their Spirit Resist, right? Like every time you hit a headshot, they get another -7 resist, and at this point you do insane amounts of damage. Especially in longer fights, because they're gonna take so much Spirit Shred, right, with this build. So if you need more damage and anti-heal, you can go for either Toxic Bullets and a Spirit Rend, or if you don't have 2 slots, you can also just buy Crippling Headshots. I think it's the same price than the 2 combined. It's a tiny bit weaker, but it only requires 1 slot. And the reason I say it's a tiny bit weaker is, on paper it gives you a bit more health, right, than them 2. 150 instead of 100. But it doesn't have the Toxic Bullets effect, so the bleed damage, but you don't usually need it because you do so much damage. And it gives you a flat 18% resist on both bullet and spirit, and it gives you healing reduction in one, right? So this item is also really insane if you need extra damage, so you can also very easily buy Crippling. And again, remember this build does a lot of gun damage, so, you know, having 80% reduction on both is really good. So you can go for those 2, or Crippling, Unstoppable we talked about. if you end up ulting more, and if the enemy ends up having a lot of gun damage, Juggernaut is an insane item, which I still really like, because it lowers the fire rate of everyone that is shooting you. But yeah, at that point, let's assume, you know, you have Unstop, you have everything, and you're like Jesus, and it's 50k. Even now, you can still go for an upgrade, which is like kind of a meme. I think I got to this item once. It usually doesn't happen in super high rated games where you get that much money. But you can end up selling Titanic Mag, right? Where you lose the ammo and buy Lucky Shot instead. And it seems really random, but like Lucky Shot gives you 40% extra ammo. So it's like a really luxury replacement for Titanic Mag. And I said this in the tooltip. Luxury replacement. A few other options, I guess, that I'm gonna mention. If you really need raw damage and not, like, if you're like behind, I guess, and you feel like you don't do enough damage at this point, which shouldn't be the issue usually, but you can go for a Spiritual Overflow. I don't like this item just as much for 7, because yeah, it tells you it goes for ability duration, right? But at this point we have enough spirit to where Power Surge is active at all times. So we don't really need it, and it also, the ability duration only procs after you start it. So if you start the fight off in Power Surge, it will not extend the duration, if that makes sense. It will only work on the next duration. But fire rate and spirit power is really good, right? So if you need raw damage, you can go for Spiritual Overflow if you do. And then if you need more damage and you feel if you feel like you have enough damage but you want a bit more resist while still being aggressive, you can go for weighted shot instead of Spirit Rend or Toxic Bullets, because this item gives you 16% debuff resist and 16% spirit resist, right? So you can end up selling like Enchanter's Emblem or, you know, Spirit Shielding. Go for weighted shots. Otherwise, debuff remover is self-explanatory. You can buy this at any point in the game if you need it. I do like Counterspell a lot right now. I don't usually buy them at all times. And I also, funnily enough, don't buy Suppressor a lot. Again, mostly because it doesn't give us the next threshold for Spirit, right? So I only buy this if the enemy really has a lot of gun heroes, right? Usually, you have enough resists with Fleetfoot, with Bullet Resilience. If you can't afford Bullet Resilience and you're kind of desperate, you can go for Suppressor at any point in the game if you need it to slow down enemy fire rate. But yeah, that's about it. And I'll talk about the investments one last time. Even in the late game, right? So once we have this build done, even in the late game, these items will give us another perfect threshold to the next step. Right, so if we buy Spiritual, or if we buy Spirit Rend plus Toxic, we're at the next threshold, where we get another bonus, right? If we buy 2 green items, let's say double armor, we're at the next threshold. And even if we buy, you know, something like Mercurial, we will be at the next threshold if we need it. And I'll try this out, actually. This might actually be better than Spiritual. I'll report back to you, but again, it's really like a super niche case scenario, because I don't think at this point you need more damage. You can try this out if you want in the super late game to have more damage, if you just want raw damage instead of like Spirit Rend or Toxic Bullets. Yeah, that's about it. There was a lot of yapping. That was one of my longest build videos ever, and I feel like I still was missing something. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I hope that helped quite a lot with like how you could craft builds, how you could think about your builds. And again, try out this build. It's amazing. One thing I'll say at the very end is it is very aim intensive. You want to hit every bullet because there's so much bullet damage in this build, right? In the old Power Surge build, in the Shock build I ran, as long as you hit one of the 3 bullets in the burst, you know, the Power Surge procs. But here, ideally, you want to hit every single bullet because you're doing so much bullet damage, okay? So that's the one thing I'll note compared to the Shock build. If this build feels weaker to you than the Shock build, it's probably because you're not hitting enough bullets, right? So I would say, I am not saying this is not a noob-friendly build. I think you can run this in any rating, but make sure to hit your bullets in this build. It's more important than usual for 7, because most 7 builds are so much spirit damage that, you know, as long as you hit one of the 3 bullets in the burst, you will be fine, right? So if you do like jiggle aim and you hit 1, you will do most to max damage, but not in this build. In this build, you really want to go for every single bullet hit. So yeah, make sure to get your aim up, gamers. And until next time, see you friends, bye bye.